Meeting of the February 1st Finance Committee meeting to order, and I'll read the usual reason why we're not meeting in person. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, the meeting of the Town of Northfield Finance Committee will be conducted by a remote participation to the greatest extent possible. A recording of the proceedings will be posted on the website as soon as possible after the meeting. So I'm going to postpone the minutes till after we hear the people that are here for their budget. So first of all is the EMS budget that we're going to talk about. And first of all, I'd like to thank Mark for the work that he does in setting up the EMS service here in town and our ambulance service. And that's appreciated. But I think we need to go into some of the budget items, Mark, as you know, the way we do it. First of all, I'd like to just mention that the role of the Finance Committee, most of you know pretty much what it is we do, but by Mass General Law, we're required to make recommendations to the voters about the budgets, any expenditures of money, and that's why we take the time to go through these budgets. So for the EMS, Mark, I heard you last week tell the Select Board that the Finance Committee did not understand your financing. And I'd like to, put it another way from our perspective, that I don't think you understand us as to what we've said about the financing. So you've given us a mission statement that I've shared with the other members. And if you look at the figures that you have furnished in there, which is good, we know that the town budget has absorbed the cost of the ambulance. And that was a vote, a town meeting vote some time ago. And then per your statement there, you asked for and received an additional $40,900 for fiscal 20 above your enterprise fund. I believe you started serving Bernardston in January of 19. Even though, excuse me? Okay.
I'm going to put you back on mute until you need me to talk, okay? That way you don't get the feedback back here.
I can't hear you. Mark, I didn't hear what you said.
Lois, I think he muted because he's getting background. He's at the EMS station. I think he's getting background on his radio.
Okay. And my phone's ringing here, but. Okay. Okay, that was 2019 we talked about. And then I believe you started serving the town of Bernardston perhaps in January, and then the agreement was signed in July. And you didn't think you'd need additional funding. You thought it was for the 1 year only. Then the next fiscal year, you did have to ask for and receive $44,621. These are from your own statements there, which are correct. For the taxation for operating expenses, in addition to your enterprise fund. Now for fiscal 22, you're asking for $39,019 from taxation in addition to your enterprise fund. During this time, you are serving Bernardston in addition to Northfield, while Northfield funds your shortfall in operating funds. It appears that you're also taking on a section of Irving for a $15,000 annual contribution from that town. If that effective date is now, whenever, mid-year, as it appears to be, when do they start contributing? We'd like to know that. And then how about your budget that's a set for the current year now? If you're starting to take them on, are there going to be increases in your budget? That sort of thing that we'd be concerned about. for fiscal 22, that you said you want to start making the ambulance payment. That's contrary to the town meeting vote. The town meeting vote was that the town would pay for the ambulance over 5 years and the interest thereon. Because you say you'd make the ambulance payment, but you still would be looking for money for your operating expenses from the town. Why not swap that around? And those things concern us. And what's changed? Why would you say you'd try to cover it when you don't have enough for your operating expense? Why not fund your own operating expense, and the town should make it as their vote was that they would? Who's making the decisions about financing this operation? Whether we expand, are there going to be, I haven't seen any plan to show what your plans are. This Miller's Falls portion of Irving came up as a total surprise. And are you looking to take on others? It would be nice to have some sort of a plan to know what we could plan on. And again, as to the town finance committee's responsibilities to our voters, it's to make recommendations on expenditures. And these are the things that we're concerned about, and we're concerned about your understanding of what we're concerned with for our voters. So let's start out by going through the increases in your budget.
I just wanted to say, Lois, if you can hear me,
Yes.
when you get to the part where you're talking about whether to pay the ambulance versus to pay the town budget, I'd like to speak to that because that was a recommendation I made to him, so I can address that.
All right, you want to do it now?
Sure, I just didn't want to get in the way if you're going through a certain agenda.
No,
The reason I advised him, he said that he thought they'd be in a position to make a payment, to be able to contribute more. And you're right, he could just ask for zero from the town, let you make the final ambulance payment, and that would be that. The reason I said he should have this discussion with you and make the approach different was that if we were to continue to say, and this is a discussion that has to be had, Northfield's share, because Northfield you would think would be paying something towards ambulance. Now, maybe you want it to be zero and self-sufficient. No other department really is, but if you want it to be zero and self-sufficient, that's one thing. Otherwise, it seemed to me that if he took it to zero this year, he'd be fighting next year to say, okay, I'd like that 35,000 each year as part of Northfield's contribution. If we take it to zero, then it's gone, then he has to come back next year and ask for it again. Whereas if he paid the ambulance and he kept that neutral, it wouldn't affect the budget. The budget wouldn't go down that 35 and then go up that 35 next year or 40 if that was his request. So that's just a discussion that needs to happen. So I told him to approach it that way in presenting it, and then you can talk about it.
Okay, well, the intent never was that there would be 35 or 40,000 or whatever each year. It's an enterprise fund that was supposed to be self-sufficient. So, and the vote was that the town would pay for the ambulance. So that's what I'd like.
The problem is that's why I had him put together the mission statement, is that he's being requested to provide 24/7 paramedic level coverage. In order to do that, he cannot be self-sufficient. He can't. You cannot do that on absolutely, because it's on absolutely no additional money coming in from anywhere. It's just not possible that we do not take in as a town enough revenue to run that kind of operation. Now, if you want to change the operation, if you want to make it part-time, if you want to cut certain hours out of it, if you want to run it at basic EMT and not paramedic, then you can change the funding formula. He's presenting you with a budget showing you how he funds it. And in order to do that, he needs a certain amount of revenue. He's tried to make some of that revenue up by including the town of Bernardston, because they actually contribute a pretty sizable chunk of revenue through insurance and through that. And as the select board agreed, and as they will now be doing as part of Irving, also a portion of revenue plus a contribution from both of those communities towards the cost of the service. So I just wanted to lay out there that my recommendation to him was, if you're going to be, upfront and say, then the town of Northfield's contribution should be something each year, then we should try to figure out what that is and not cut it down to zero and argue again, have this whole discussion again next year. We should have it once and for all, taking the ambulance aside.
One thing we need to get straight is what service is being offered and what coverage do we have? We hear that we need to have, we know we need to have a paramedic on, and there's got to be a
Two.
second person on driving.
You have to have 2 paramedics, generally,
All right, well, that's
to
what
have
we need to
paramedic
know.
level service. But
we don't-
you
we
can
don't-
let
we don't
him talk to that.
We don't necessarily need 2 paramedics on all the time. However, if we want to be able to staff both trucks and the need for a second paramedic, we'd have to have a second paramedic around. However,
Okay.
my concern is always getting the first truck staffed with a crew so that we know that we have a crew available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That crew needs to be at the highest level possible, which is 1 paramedic and 1 basic EMT at the minimum for staffing. And then beyond that is there are certain calls that come in that do require a second paramedic. And we can either get that through our own services or we have to contract that from somebody else. So there are times where we do need a second paramedic, but 99% of the time we are looking just to be able to guarantee staffing for the first truck. The second truck is staffed with volunteers if available.
Okay, we keep hearing that, you know, I guess you're headed toward 24/7, 365. Okay.
We're
But
not heading there. We are required to do that. I mean, that's the
Okay.
expectation of the citizens. is
Okay,
that
now,
we don't go to bed at midnight and then shut the service down and shut the lights off and call it a day. We have people that are still on call, just like the other town departments, that if we have a call, we have to respond 24 hours a day, regardless of whether we have somebody sitting here or somebody at home or
I
somebody in
understand.
bed.
Yes. But what we want to know is what coverage you are. Okay, you have somebody on this shift. I don't know if you divide it in 3 8-hour shifts or how you do it, but we want to know.
I would recommend you read the mission statement because it's clearly identified in the mission statement.
Well, we want to know exactly what you've got for coverage because people go by the station up there and there's no extra vehicle there. So, okay, you've got people on call. I understand that. But can you tell us what you've got for actual people being there and what you've got, what your arrangement is? I know you've got some on call. You've got some that you're paying part-time, part salary to cover. That's the kind of thing we want to know. How are we covering the 365? And sure, it's required. I don't doubt that. I'm not questioning that. But we don't have a fixed, I don't have anyway, a fixed idea of just what this coverage is. So that's,
Lois, I can answer some of that. I live 2 houses down, as well as the captain of the EMS department. We're both paramedics. And Mark is our 3rd in-town paramedic. And we have set up a schedule where one of us is home 365. I work opposite days of Becca, who works opposite the rotating days of Mark. That's all given to the town for free.
I say,
We're not on the schedule. We're the backup people. We then have 8 paramedics on our schedule that pick up shifts. Now there are open shifts every day, 16 hours a day, full pay for someone to come sit here. If someone doesn't pick one of those up, then we do occasionally staff via pager at free for the town until we get a call, because that's me, Mark, or Becca picking up that call. And then we have in our budget, 40 hours a week to pay a paramedic, which right now we haven't been able to fill, which would take the other half of the week and give us someone in station, because currently I have someone that works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 16-hour shifts. And then we would have that second person work the opposite end of the week, the 40 hours, and that would be one person in the station 6 days a week.
okay, now you say sometimes one person is covering 16 hours a day.
In our staffing grid, if we had every one of our open positions filled, we have one person full-time 16 hours a day. The problem is currently we don't have the workforce, so then me, Mark, and Becca pick up from pager. Last year, we had 400 and something calls. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, and we missed 15 of them, and only 4 of them were in the town of Northfield. And of those 4, 2 of them, we had a paramedic on scene providing care for the patient at the ALS level, starting IVs, doing things that police, fire, they can't do while we waited for an ambulance.
Okay. I think what I misunderstood, when you say you have 16 hours a day, you don't mean that's one person doing the whole 16. It could be 2 people, right?
It can be split. However, we work around people's schedules to get people in here
Yes.
and
Yeah.
serving the.
We have, so take 20, the first 24 hours. Okay, so take 24 hours. Okay, 24 hours in a day. Of that, we have 16 hours out of that 24 in which we are willing to pay a full hourly rate for somebody to be in the station available to respond. Now, whether a person picks up an 8-hour, and we break it into 2 8-hour blocks. If somebody wants to come in and take 8 hours of it, great. If somebody wants to come in and take all 16 of it, great. All right. But we have 16 hours out of each and every day of the week that we are looking to pay a full hourly rate for.
For the paramedic, right?
So the first person we hope is a paramedic. All right.
Yes.
So that they get preference being paramedic because that's the highest level we want.
Sure.
So the other 8 hours out of the day, we have money budgeted to be on call, which means that somebody can be home in bed and available to respond if they choose to be on call. And by putting those 2, so that's a 24-hour block. So we have 16 out of the 24 hours full hourly rate compensated, and then 8 hours of half hourly rate to be on call and available. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in the building, but you can be somewhere within a reasonable response area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's one person. The second person, again, the entire 24 hours out of the day, we are budgeting for half hourly rate for a second person to be available. Now that person can come in here if they want to work for $9.68 an hour and come down here and sit with our paramedic and be available to respond at a moment's notice. God bless them. But for half hourly rate, they can be anywhere within a reasonable response area so that when a call comes in, the first person and the second person can merge together and create a crew. That guarantees us our staffing. The problem is that the reason that we're able to take money and make money and offset some of these things that we're talking about, like we're talking about the ambulance payment, is that a few of us are working for free. All right, is that we are not putting ourselves on that schedule. We're not taking those hours of compensation to be on call because we live right here. We can just work the pager and go when the pager goes off. So that's, in order for me to budget, to give you guys a budget, I have to balance budget that and have to assume that every hour out of the week, based on that model, I have to come up with the money to pay somebody to do that. The reality is that when we don't have somebody sitting here, there's a good chance that there's a crew available. They're just not sitting here, and it's saving the town money because we're not taking the rate, the finance to cover our coverage. So that's where I have to ask the town for money to supplement that budget based off of the 18 months in advance expectation of what my revenue is going to be. Do the math from what my expectation is compared to what the numbers are based off of the budget. X minus Y, the difference is what I have to ask for. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're spending that money. If you go back to my mission statement, I clearly stay in there is that we attempt to stay within the money that we collect within the fiscal year, meaning that we're trying to never go over and always putting money aside and excess revenue year after year for the capital expenditures. And we've successfully done that. I mean, we are on target right now for the next ambulance that we're going to be asking for in 2027. We are on target to take that money from excess revenue without money from taxation. Just like we took the last one where half the money came from a 2.5 override, the other half of it was donations. The old ambulance that the 2017 replaced was a donation. The vehicle was donated to the town of Northfield, and the money that was used to outfit it, repair it, put it into service, all came out of excess revenue. None of that money came from taxation. We are on target to do the same thing. However, year over year, there has to be this upfront money that I have to ask in order to balance my budget going from year to year. Do I anticipate spending all that money? No. The problem is I can't turn it back into the town until after it's certified by DOR. DOR just got done, or hasn't even officially certified the first year that we're talking about. That's where, if we get that certified, that's where I'm anticipating returning the money from year one to offset the budget this year. Now, whether it goes towards the ambulance payment or it goes towards the expense, I don't care. I'm willing to give that money back one way or another. But again, because we're talking about being 18 months in advance of me having to give you a budget, and then the DOR piece of it doesn't happen for a year after the closure of the fiscal year, that's where there's this lag between I'm asking for money, ask for money, but I can't give it back to you yet because it has to be certified first. So that's the dilemma that I'm in when it comes to creating a budget that's to trying to show you guys that we're not costing you all that much money.
But now, going back to when this was established, it was set up that with an enterprise fund, not at first, but then we had an enterprise fund. And the idea was that you'd be self-sufficient. And you've made changes since then that have increased the cost of operation because you're doing more business, we'll say. And it was supposed to be that you would be saving enough to cover the next ambulance replacement, because at that time when that one was bought, it was to last for 10 years, and then you would be saving money toward it. So it's different from what was anticipated when this was set up with an enterprise fund.
So the enterprise fund, I mean, again, I'm not really here to discuss ancient history at this point, okay? But the enterprise fund was established in what, 2009, 2010, where we were a basic level service trying to offset the cost of providing first response. And we successfully did that for over 10 years, okay? Over the course of time, the expectations have changed. The realities of EMS services in Franklin County has changed. And as a result of that, we have expanded our scope of practice with the approval of our select boards, by the way. I mean, Jack was sat in on most of those meetings. I sat there with our town administrator. I've gotten the approval to make these changes. I don't understand why we're arguing over the changes that have been made, because these changes have been approved by my bosses each and every time that these changes have happened. We as a community, the decision makers have decided that they want to move forward with progressing an ambulance service forward that not only provides the highest level of care, but it's also reliable. We've had these issues in the past where we're doing better things, but we don't have the staffing for it. Now, I hear people complaining that, oh, well, there's an accident in front of my house and somebody hit a tree, but AMR showed up and still had to take the patient. Yeah, we're still a paramedic service, but we can't come down there and with only one person. We have to have the two people in order to transport. So you're asking me to rub two sticks together to do it for free. And unfortunately, this is the reality of it, is that if I'm giving you a paramedic level service in this community for $40,000 a year, that's less than some of the assessments these other towns are paying to another service. Now, we got Bernardston on board. They're contributing over $100,000 a year to offset our operational costs. Who's benefiting from that?
The town is not contributing that.
The town.
That's your insurance payments.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
Yeah, but when you say the town is contributing, I don't believe they are.
The insurance companies for the citizens of the town of Northfield are also contributing.
Sure, absolutely.
$130,000. But you know what? What we are getting is a paramedic level service, so that when your trachea is blocked, I can take a scalpel, cut your throat open, and put a tube down there and be able to breathe for you.
We understand that. Yeah.
Well, Lois, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Mark, according to your EMS mission, which states primarily you're supposed to provide service to the community, you state that you've hardly had an impact on the budget for the town, yet in your own information packet that you provided, in the last 4 years, and this is discounting the last year of the payment of the ambulance, which you made an asterisk for, the town has subsidized or funded your ambulance service. This includes the ambulance and operating expenses to $349,501.
Yep.
I don't consider that a little bit of money. That's a
So
substantial amount of money that the taxpayers have paid to operate the ambulance service beyond the
what about the
revenues. Don't interrupt me.
What
I'm
about the
speaking.
1.5
Do
million
not
that I
interrupt.
brought in?
Mr. Poirier, please, I'm speaking. I'll give you all the time you want, but that's what the taxpayers paid. And the ambulance fund was supposed to be self-sufficient. It is not. It is, the taxpayers are paying operating costs and the ambulance. So I would say almost $350,000 over the last 4 years is a substantial amount of money. So I don't want to hear that. That's, like I said, they're not paying much for it. Your own figures state that the town is paying a lot of money for this service beyond the operating budget of the enterprise fund. So that's a substantial amount of money.
Okay, so let me address that. So $300,000 of that is the ambulance, okay, that the town has agreed to pay. All right. Now let's go back in history here with one.
No, that's 200, a little over 200,000, because you have marked that you intend to pay it out of the enterprise fund the last year payment. But still, you're looking at operating expenses of 40,900 the first year, second year of 44,621, and you said estimate of $39,019 for this. And
Correct.
Again, you also had brought to our attention, I'm not bringing the past, but you said that the town would only have to fund 1 year of operating costs of the first year of providing service to the town of Bernardston. That has not occurred. You've come now back for the past fiscal year and the next fiscal year, you're asking for additional money. So and the other thing too is you said that by doing the extra revenue of Bernardston, you would be self-sufficient. But obviously you're not, and you also have been complaining about problems with not making sufficient revenue by doing runs to Bernardston. The fact you're losing money on Medicare runs, Medicaid runs, and you also have said that AMR is delinquent on, I'd like to know how much AMR is delinquent to your service. But the other thing, and then the other thing is the enterprise fund has to absorb the non-collectibles from other communities. So it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Now you wish to take on another community, which is Irving. Again, and your own statement says is to get additional revenue to try to absorb some of the cost of running the ambulance. So we're having to grow again just to keep this fund, the enterprise fund, operational. And the other thing that gets me here is that, again, I strongly disagree with the fact that you say Bernardston's paying for it. They are not. Yes, the people who have insurance are paying for it, but the community is not, as a taxpayers. Because you take a look, in all honesty, things that you should be actually addressing on indirect costs concerning your ambulance service, Bernardston's not paying for workman's comp. Town of Northfield is. Health insurance for any full-time employee, which you are looking to potentially hire, Northfield pays. Any debt services, administrative costs, liability insurance, retirement costs, and any of the other expenses. They're not contributing to that at all. And DOR sets best practice, you should be billing or have an arrangement for indirect costs to other communities and a formula, either use of per person or a percentage of the runs should be charged to another community. You're saying that they're looking to give us a donation of $10,000. That doesn't obligate Bernardston for anything. And the other problem you have is, according to Andrea, Bernardston has not paid us the $10,000 donation as of our last meeting.
Check is in.
Well, you told us last they had not.
Check is in the hand today.
That was 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the thing too here is with Bernardston, what was the formula you set up for them to get to the $10,000? Are any of the indirect expenses were part of that formula?
Can I speak now?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a lot of misconceptions in that statement you just made. Okay. And I'll be honest with you, I forgot what most of them were as we were going through it. If we want to take them individually again, that's fine. But we'll start with the Bernardston question, okay? My analysis for what Bernardston was is that they have zero obligation to pay us per the contract. And the reason that they had no obligation financially per the initial contract was that the alternative is that we don't do the service and we give up $100,000 in revenue that comes from wherever you want to call it, that Bernardston's paying for, or the insurance companies are paying for it, wherever. All I know is that the town of Northfield would be paying that money if we didn't get it from them, okay? So the deal was with them was to get them on board to do those additional calls to help drive down the cost to Northfield, okay? Because we had determined that we were not going to be able to substantially be able to continue to provide service with volunteers based on the current call volume in the town of Northfield. Before we went to Bernardston and picked up their call volume, we were still doing about a call a day, okay? And a call a day means you're asking volunteers to take 4 hours out of their day each and every day of the week to do this. And the burnout it's not going to happen. It was destined to fail. And that's where I sat down, had a conversation with Tracy Rogers and Bernie Kubiak, who, again, the turnover in our administrator doesn't help the situation here, okay? Sat down with them, explained the situation, and says, here's what we need to do. We need to change our staffing model. And we can go to a South County model. That's great. But you're asking the town of Northfield to now pay $500,000 a year to do this. Well, that's not going to happen. Well, we can ignore it, and when it fails and somebody dies or nobody gets an ambulance, then that's the other model. Well, that's not satisfactory either. Okay, well, here's something in the middle, okay, which is let me go and do additional calls to Bernardston to pick up $100,000 potentially in revenue to drive down the bottom line, because my request is going to be for $147,000 annually from the town of Northfield. Okay. And that wasn't going to fly either. So, okay, let me go do these additional calls. The good news is that we could absorb those additional calls by having this paid staff, okay, or on-call staff, guaranteeing us to be able to do those calls. We can provide the service successfully and drive the cost down in Northfield. But there's going to be a cost to the town of Northfield. When the enterprise fund was generated or started in 2010, it was based off of us being a basic level ambulance service with the goal of only offsetting the volunteer costs of that service, where we're doing 100 calls a year. Okay, things have dramatically changed since 2010.
And at that time, we weren't paying to dedicate somebody on call. It was hope and pray that somebody was going to answer the call, and not just one person, two people. Right.
I mean, I don't want to bring Skip in the conversation, but I mean, I think Skip can tell you that our service, from what it used to be when we first started, when we were in the Greenfield Recorder as Northfield EMS is dysfunctional, okay, and then when Bonnie Latois and the board, the select board at that point in time, took over the EMS organization because it wasn't functioning, all right, and came up with a better solution here as to how we can provide emergency medical services in the town of Northfield. All right, that where we are today, we are one of the best services in Franklin County right now, okay, because of the fact that we are able to staff truck at the paramedic level and provide service. And the only way we're going to be able to continue to do that is to continue to get additional revenue to make it more financially feasible for the town of Northfield. But again, you're throwing down that number of $300,000.
That's your own numbers. That's your own numbers.
I understand that, but let's take out the ambulance question, okay? If we want to go back to how we ended up with that ambulance question, we have to go back to a former town administrator, Brian Noble, who, after we had gotten the 1980, what year were you born?
I was born in 92. It's 93.
1993 ambulance that we had donated to us, that we then took the enterprise fund and outfitted it and repaired it to get it up and running, all right? Brian Noble comes in and says, I'm going to get you a new ambulance. I'm going to make First Light pay for it. Okay, how are we going to do that, Brian? Well, we're going through a reassessment and this and that, and I'm just going to make them pay for it. okay, so we go to town meeting and with that plan, and then he leaves. And then that didn't happen. So now we're on the hook for this ambulance. Don't get me wrong, it's a great ambulance. And like I said, I appreciate the fact that the town stepped up and got us that ambulance at a time where we really did need it. I mean, the town of Northfield has not paid for a first response vehicle ever, for the most part, except for half of one ambulance, that the 2007 van ambulance. Half of that money came from donation that I had to go around and beg, borrow, and ask for donations. And the other half of it was paid via the only 2.5 override by the citizens to pay for that truck. Other than that, our first ambulance beyond that was an old police cruiser that was destroyed and totaled, that was put together to throw some medical equipment on it. So somewhere in the last 20 years, the town of Northfield would have had to have paid for an EMS vehicle if it wasn't for EMS doing what we're doing. All right. So, but what I'm saying is take that money out of it. We're talking about $120,000 here over the last 3 years, is where we've had to ask supplemental money for our expense budget. All right. $120,000. In the big scheme of things over 3 years, $120,000 in a budget of what, $13-14 million? I'm not sure what the total budget is for the town of Northfield. We're not talking huge amounts of money to provide a 24-hour day, 7 day a week, 365 day a year service to the citizens of Northfield, because that's who's benefiting from this, is the citizens of Northfield. If it wasn't for the supplemental money that we've been going out and getting by doing other services to other communities, that assessment to the town of Northfield would be so much higher than it is right now.
My concern is the issue is Bernardston's lack. Who negotiated this MOU? Did you negotiate this with the town of Bernardston, or did the town administrator do this?
So let's go back to the assessment to Bernardston, or it's not even assessment. Per the contract, the actual contract that was signed between our select boards, Bernardston has no obligation to pay us a dime for the service that we're providing. Okay, zero. Hearing the noise that was coming from this board, as well as at the time the select board, I went to the citizens of Bernardston, went to the Bernardston decision maker, it was Pete Shedd, and I said, look, here's what's going on. Okay, I had a meeting with them. I had a meet with Pete. I had a meeting with their finance committee and their select board, and it says, here is what's going on. The people in Northfield are looking for Bernardston to have some skin in the game. All right. And there was numbers that were thrown out from all the way from $40,000 a year to $20,000 a year. I sat in a meeting with the select board and I'm sorry, with the finance committee here, and Jack looked at EQV and said, well, you know, 13,000, that's sort of right around the number. So you know what? I went back to them and I said, look, I need something. You know, what is it you're willing to give us? And they said, well, they came back with a number of 10,000. I said, thank you. Because you know what? That's 10,000 more than what they're obligated to pay.
They're not. The thing is, the issue of obligation is when you negotiate an MOU with them, we don't have an obligation to provide them ambulance service either.
We do now.
But we do. But the other thing is, if you negotiate an MOU with them, they can't just say they're not obligated to pay. You simply say, this is what we expect. We work out in negotiations to cover certain costs involved. And the thing is, you are supposed to, when you negotiate.
There was a contract that was written between our select board, who is my boss, and their select board, which is their boss, and it was signed by both of those parties. That is an obligation for us to provide service under the terms of that. That's
a memorandum of understanding.
It's
not
a
contract. It's a memorandum of understanding.
Bernie.
And the thing is,
it doesn't say MOU on top of it. It says contract.
Agreement.
Right? We are obligated to provide that service to those citizens over there via that contract for the terms of that contract. It was in good faith that I went over there and asked them to help sustain, for whether you guys wanted it for expenses or they wanted it for a donation. From my perspective, they had no obligation to give us a dime. And I was thankful that they wrote us a check for $10,000. I have that check for $10,000 in hand today. and it will be going into the ambulance donation account when we deposit it.
All right, so you're saying that they have many communities do contracts or you could MOUs, whatever you want, and they do assess and negotiate on covering indirect costs. You're not covering any indirect costs
You're
whatsoever
absolutely right.
with Bernardston.
Most towns do that. But you know what? When we signed that agreement with them, the deal was to get them in our pocket. All right, to get them to the point where we can. No, let me finish. Let me finish. The deal was to get them so that they're contributing to our organization, because we have fixed costs that we have to offset, and those fixed costs allows us to be able to continue to provide service not only to them, but create a better service for the town of Northfield. By doing that, okay, we had to go at zero cost because they did have alternatives. They were willing. They could have gone to AMR. They could have gone to Turner's. They could have gone to Greenfield. But you know what? By them going to those services, the reality is that I'm still going to be over there doing calls in Bernardston because we have to go mutual aid when those services are flat on their face. We are still going to be over there. We're still going to Gill. We're still going to go to Irving. We're still going to go to all these places, whether we are the first one in line or the second and third in line. We still.
But you're also, the issue is you're exposing also the town to these issues of the cost to the town itself of workman's compensation, potential health insurance, administrative costs, liability insurance, retirement costs, and various other things that are not covered by any other community assisting with us. So the town of Northfield shoulders that responsibility.
Okay, now wait a minute.
Can I speak to the indirect costs for 1 second?
Yes.
I think we're missing a point here. What I understand what both sides are saying, but what needs to be understood is that to provide the level of service, the EMS has a staffing model. He pays that staff under that staffing model, whether they go to a Northfield call, whether they sit in the office, or whether they go to Bernardston. So that's what he means by fixed costs. So in order to provide that level of service, we have fixed costs. He's looking at a model to help with those fixed costs. If we pay someone to sit in the station, the town absorbs all those costs, including all the benefit costs that Bernie keeps mentioning, all the matching payroll, all the retirement. We will be paying those on our own dime anyway. What he's trying to do is do a revenue stream whereupon we are receiving some additional revenue to help with those fixed costs. Now, if you don't want to do those fixed costs, you have to change the staffing model.
All right, but the other thing is now you also have stated you have an agreement with Irving, and an agreement that was not brought to the attention of the Finance Committee until the night before the agreement, contract, whatever, was brought forward to the Select Board for their approval. Now that's not being very transparent. We find out about it the night before. No, we found out the night before the Select Board meeting. No one notified the Finance Committee, or I wasn't told, or other members weren't told that an agreement was being negotiated, nor was one concluded with Irving. And we were told that a potential reported cost that they would pay us was $15,000. Now the thing I don't understand.
That at the last meeting.
But the thing is, Andrea, why did we find out the night before on a completed agreement?
All right, there's one other thing that I'd like to bring up. You talk about we need to serve these other towns to have the income to have the service in Northfield even. But one thing that I don't hear mentioned is the cost of providing that service to those towns. It's not all, if you call it, want to say profit, whatever. There's a cost to that, to providing that service for those towns.
So let me be clear. We don't need Bernardston and Irving. We don't need them if you want to open up your checkbook. Okay. Yeah. If you want to write me a check for $500,000, I'll do Northfield exclusively.
Okay.
But that's not what I've heard that anybody wants to have happen.
It's the net that you're talking about, not all the total receipts. You talk about how much income you get from their insurances and That's all it is.
Yep.
But there is a cost that comes out of that, the cost of providing that service.
So
it's not
again,
all,
Which we're already paying if we're staffing. That's what we're trying to say. If we staff at that level, we're already going to have this budget. The question is, how are we going to pay for this budget? We could pay for it all as Northfield, and Northfield would only be served, and Northfield would pay all that revenue and receive all the revenue that, from it.
Yeah.
Or do we also, for this level of service, get other people in? Because Northfield doesn't generate enough calls. Now, like I said, to just pay for this service without you increasing your budget as an operating budget. He can't do that revolving. So he's trying to do another revenue stream to help pay for those fixed costs.
what I'd like to see is a plan ahead of time as to what's going to happen. Like all of us,
No.
Bernardston came on. Now here it is mid-year and taking on Miller's Falls, the Miller's Falls section of Irving. How far ahead is this planning being done so
plan-
that we
the
know
plan-
ahead of time what the costs are going to be?
So
approximately?
the cost of operating
Cost is
our
no
service
change.
doesn't change unless we change substantially the staffing model. Okay, the cost of running the business does not change. I mean, we're paying all this stuff already today.
Yeah.
The problem is that when you ask about the plan is I get a phone call from the fire chief going, "Hey, want to become my ambulance service?" That's how these things happen, is because they have a service that's not providing them with a decent service. They call me up and say, "Hey, can you help me out?"
But this isn't the first time you've talked to Irving. You tried that a few years ago and it
Correct.
didn't fly.
You're right. You're right.
So
It did-
what's
because-
next? Now, you're going to Gil some. Are you going to be negotiating with Gil?
I have at this time no plans to negotiate with Gil, but that doesn't mean that Gil can't come call me in an hour and say, "Hey, Mark, let's talk about becoming my ambulance service in the town of Gil." I mean, I don't have this master plan of taking over dominance of the world here. It's, these people come to us, and the deal is that if it makes sense for us to do it and we can absorb it without a huge financial impact, it makes sense for us to continue to add call volume to help offset our costs, because we only make money if the wheels on the truck are going round and round. If they're sitting here, it's 100% cost to the community. We only make money when we're transporting.
As a little side note too, our budget's split up, and if you look at it, our big thing that we pay for is wages and hourly staffing. We have to staff the same amount of people if we're just doing Northfield as if we're doing Bernardston and Irving.
Yeah.
Our medical supply cost doesn't go up when we take on these other towns because we have amounts that we have to keep on the truck, and we get reimbursed one-for-one exchange for most of our medical supplies through the hospital. They don't charge us in a one-for-one exchange. The other thing is, with our fuel costs, we're basically paying the same amount because these transports are pretty short. Our electric bill stays the same. Everything stays the same, and we increase revenue. We're not costing any additional, and we're increasing the amount of money that we have available to make future purchases.
Yeah, but
Well,
there's
you had
also
an
additional, sorry, Lois, go ahead.
You had an increase in diesel fuel this year, and medical supplies increased by $2,000.
Yeah. I mean, no offense, the cost of diesel has gone from 99 cents a gallon, it's going up to probably $3 or $4 a gallon. So I mean, that's the anticipated
Cost of living increase.
I got to figure that out 18 months in advance here. I mean, that's why that money's gone up. We probably took a reduction in it last year and brought it back up to this, what we anticipate of an amount for this year based on what we think the cost is going to be.
And when fuel costs go up, our delivery costs of our medical supplies go up. It would have gone up this year if we didn't have additional calls.
Yeah, but
So
what
with
did
these
you just
additional-
say about,
But
you took them at the hospital and so forth? It's not free. The hospital can't furnish them for nothing.
Oh, again, you're making an assumption here. I mean, we put in a request at the hospital on a request form. These supplies mysteriously show up in my locker down there to replace it, and I don't receive a bill. So, again, I would caution you on making assumptions about how.
Well, what's the $2,000? How did you get the $2,000 then?
So again, like we said, is that as things are becoming more expensive, unfortunately, the things that we do purchase, okay, there are things that we do have to purchase. Electrodes, for example, the dots that we put on to do 12 lead EKGs, those are $10 a pack. when we put a nasal cannula that so we can check to see how your breathing is doing, do capnography. That's a $15 piece of equipment. It's disposable. We have to use it all the time.
And some of the stuff the state requires us to use, the hospital doesn't have. But
Correct.
about 50% of it we get.
A lot of anything that we can get for free, we're getting for free. The stuff that we can't, we still have to pay for. And unfortunately, those costs do continue to rise. I mean, right. Let's look at gloves as an example right now. Gloves, you know, in the middle of a pandemic,
Yeah.
what used to be $10 a box for gloves is now going to $20 a box for gloves. I mean, that's just the reality of it.
Okay.
The question I want to ask you is, why is Irving going to be paying $15,000 for fewer runs, and Bernardston's only paying $10,000, and they are almost equal with us in the amount of runs that are done? We did 133 according to your figures, 110 to Bernardston. Yet they're only going to give 10. I don't understand your methodology for what is the amount of money that these communities should pay for the privilege of having our ambulance service.
Okay, so let's discuss it. All right. So again, we've already talked about the Bernardston deal, which is that they had zero obligation and they gave us an income payment. So thank you. The methodology there was get them on so that we can get the $100,000 to offset our costs. We do it for free. And then, you know what, we'll worry about negotiating something down the road, okay? Now, Irving, the deal with them is that they are already paying a substantial, and I say substantial, assessment to the town of Irving, to the town of Orange for the other half of their town. And in negotiation and talking with the chief of the department, he has options over there for ambulance services. And knowing what his other assessment is, the value of those runs to us is in addition to the $15,000 that we ended up negotiating down to, the other $50,000 in anticipated revenue from doing those calls over there. Okay, is that I could go for give me another number. What number do you want it to be? But you know what? If it's going to scare them away, it doesn't make any sense. Because
there's also an EQV argument here too. I mean, you're trying to somewhat look at ability to pay. Irving's ability to pay is probably a little bit higher than Bernardston's if you actually looked at EQV. If you're trying to.
The lower calls also make it so they have to subsidize a little bit more in taxation for the fact that they aren't utilizing the ambulance quite as much as Bernardston are, but we need to still provide them with an ambulance.
And both of them have first responders. We're just doing ambulance.
Let's move on to that discussion. So in my mind, the amount of money that I'm asking for the town of Northfield is the budget to operate the town of Northfield's first response, emergency medical response.
And
okay.
Ambulance.
The ambulance is a whole nother piece of it. That piece of it, for the most part, we're saying is the self-sustaining piece of it. The first response piece of it, we are the people that in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, when you're having a chest pain call, you know, we are the ones that are getting toned to come out and provide medical first response. All right. Now, we happen to be doing it at a paramedic level with a paramedic level ambulance and provide the transport. But if it was not for that piece of this, okay, who would be your first response in the town of Northfield? Who is going to be coming out and doing that? Now, Bernardston does that with their fire department. Irving does that with their fire department. That is money that they have put into their own budgets to provide medical first response to their own citizens. Our agreement is to provide the ambulance transport piece of it. We're not providing the medical first response to those people. All right. And that's where I go back to the fact that the ambulance, yes, the town of Northfield bought a very expensive ambulance, but you know what? That is your medical first response vehicle for the citizens in town of Northfield. All right.
That was the way the vote was, Mark, years ago when we set up an EMS service. It was to serve the town of Northfield.
Correct. And we are still doing that as diligently as we can today, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah. I just want to make
we are servicing the town of Northfield.
One clarification, which is not derogatory in any way, but just to clarify, when we do call them volunteers because they're not an employee full-time, that sort of thing. However, they do get paid when they work. And you just looked and got permission, I believe, didn't you, last week from the select board to raise that paramedic level pay per hour?
Well, that's what's in, that's part of what's in this budget request. Yes.
Yeah.
That's only for our paramedics, which
Only
are
for
8 of our
paramedic people.
employees.
Yeah.
Only for paramedics.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, but you needed to do it in order to be able to get them to work.
So we're trying to incentivize more people to choose Northfield as their destination for employment, compared to going other towns that are paying higher rates. Because, you know, I'll use myself as an example. I work in the town of Orange. All right, I make a very good salary. I mean, we're talking, I don't know, whatever. Okay, but it's substantially higher than what I'm making here, by all means. All right, now my overtime rate in Orange is going to be 2 to 3 times what it is that I could be making here. So what is the point of me wanting to come in my off hours to the town of Northfield to work as a paramedic?
Yeah.
All right. So we need to increase that hourly rate for paramedics who have a paramedic card, which is necessary for us to make the revenue that we need to provide the service that we need. We need paramedics. All right. If I'm a paramedic and I have the choice of coming to Northfield for $19.36 an hour, or I can go to Granby for 25, or I can go to,
Patriot starts brand new paramedics.
Templeton, $26 an hour.
Didn't you just get approval for 24 an hour?
Correct. That's what we have discussed is moving paramedics, just paramedics, to $24 an hour.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have plans? You're trying to make it good enough now so you can get people that will be working somewhere else as a full-time job and then give us shifts here, apparently. Okay. What are your plans?
I'm sorry, and just to clarify, and that's how we have these gaps in the schedules, because you have people working full-time jobs other places. They'll pick up a shift here and there, which I'm very thankful that they pick up a shift here and there, but we still have these holes and gaps all over our staffing model because we don't have consistent people coming in and working specific shifts on specific days of the week and blah, blah, blah. So we have
Now, do you have plans to have somebody working full-time for the town of Northfield?
Correct.
Do you have plans for that?
In last year's budget, that included the hiring of a full-time person.
Yeah.
Now, what happened is that we had a person that came in here who didn't need the benefits and was willing to work for straight hourly rates, and that's it. And he would come up here and he would work. He'd come up on Friday night and stay until Sunday morning. He'd sleep on the couch, and he worked for straight hours. He worked basically a full-time job for us, but was not getting benefits because he didn't need them. He would rather not have the question of benefits coming into it and restricting his number of hours that he could work for us. He would much rather just waive his right to the benefits, and he worked 40 straight hours, and he was getting compensated for 40 straight hours. And it worked well for us. Unfortunately, that employee has now gone away. And we have advertised to now fill that spot because we do not have enough other people that are willing to work these shifts, consistent shifts, especially on weekends, and being able to staff that with a full-time. We're looking to staff that with a full-time employee who's dedicated to the town of Northfield.
Yeah, I understand, the difficulty in getting people, and, sometimes a situation comes up, you'll have to react right away about hiring and so forth. But I just wondered, I'd like to see some sort of a long-term plan here as to, okay, if we can get people, we want to have 1 full-time employee or 2 full-time paramedics, something like that. I'd like to see something in writing like that to plan ahead so we know all of a sudden we get something, oh, this has changed, we're going to do this or that. I'd like to see some plans. You can't always carry out. I realize things come up, but that's the type of thing I'd like to see so we know what was coming.
So I again would encourage you to read the mission statement that
I have several times.
that has on there what it is we are trying to accomplish, which is being able to staff
Yeah,
the first ambulance.
but I like timelines with that sort of thing.
again, you're binding my wrists here. You're telling me you want a plan, but you're not willing to give me any money to do it with. I mean,
Well,
write me a check. I'll go hire you 3 people right now and we'll call it a day. But that's not how this works.
yeah, but you should have a business plan. That the fact of the matter that we're just automatically going on to take Bernardston, now Irving. And the thing is that I strongly suggest, or hopefully suggest in the select board, that we not grow any further until we look at reorganizing our EMS service and have it coming down with how it's going to be managed, what supervision, and what if it is necessary to grow any further beyond Irving. I do not believe it is in our best interest to grow and turn our ambulance service into a business. The business is to take care of the residents, and by taking on additional communities, that ambulance is leaving our town. It's getting wear and tear. It's going to be going down to Greenfield to mostly for the hospital. The problem you have is it's going to be out of town. That means there is a chance as we take on more runs to other communities, that ambulance will not be available for a call to our community. That means you better hope that the second ambulance, and we have personnel that will respond in a timely fashion to take care of the needs of the Northfield residents.
If that truly was your concern, you'd be staffing the first ambulance, but you're not. You're asking me to do that with volunteers and trying to find some way of keeping somebody available to that truck, the first truck, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All right. The ability for us to be able to staff that first truck is based on us having to hire staff that's dedicated to our truck and staffing. If our truck is on the road, it's helping to offset those costs, which is one of the things that I keep hearing you say is like, gotta be free.
You want it to be available to the residents of the community when they need it.
2 ambulances. And you know what? As the manager of this department, if I felt that the call volume was so overwhelming that we wouldn't be able to provide staff to Northfield, I would be telling you, you know what? We need to take a second look at this. But you know what? As the guy who lives and breathes this thing every day of his life, I can tell you that we can absorb these other 2 communities with slight risk to us not being able to staff a truck for Northfield or Bernardston or Irving based on when multiple calls on top of each other come in. But those are few and far between. And even if we didn't have a truck, even let's say we didn't staff our first truck, we didn't have a truck, the next truck is going to be coming from some other community, whether it's it's Greenfield, Turner's, Deerfield, Brattleboro, Vermont, Orange. All right. That's still going to be the response time for the second or third call. But I'm going to tell you is that we've had multiple times where we've had multiple calls, or we've had multiple patients on a single call, where we had both of our trucks out the door responding to multiple calls. We recently had one, right across the road from, I shouldn't say that. Recently with where we've had back-to-back calls where our first truck, thank God we had paid staff who was on that first truck. They took care of the first call. The second call came in. The volunteer crews came in and grabbed the second truck and provided service to the second call. That's how the system works. We can't be planning, if we think that having 100% guaranteed service is the answer, build me a hospital, give me a helicopter, and we'll call it a day. But that's
my concern is that, again, that the taxpayers of Northfield are fronting a lot of the costs of the ambulance. And we should be doing a better job of either coming up with agreement of assessments with other communities so that they share a more fair burden instead of the taxpayers of the town of Northfield. Bernardston, in all honesty, is getting a great deal. They're getting a great deal because they're not shouldering any burden really, except for the $10,000 donation. And the thing is, they have as much financial ability as the town of Northfield to pay for these services that they want. And if they do not want them, we do not have to provide them to them. I don't know why. That's why we should have a business plan and a set future plan to where we're going. We should not be in the business. Our ambulance was designed to provide service. I know, but I just think that we need to, so we don't keep increasing, like Lois has stated, more and more communities. Let's decide what organization we're going to have, what we're planning to do for the future, and if we should even in the future take on additional responsibilities. And when we mention South County, we're not saying that's the perfect model, but that's something that should be studied, or the assessment that Peterborough, New Hampshire does to the surrounding communities, so there's a fair burden sharing amongst them. That's all I'm asking
As far
for.
as South County is concerned, Mark has mentioned a couple of times about the cost. And so for the current year, the cost in South County was to Deerfield just under 300,000, 299,606. And Sunderland paid 182,195, and Whately was 97,023 for a total of almost 579,000. So Mark's right, it's costing them more, but they're also building up reserve funds that way too. But
And we are too.
Mark, we should get on to your increases here because we've got other departments waiting. I think we've pretty much covered what the increases were. Did you, the fuel, heating fuel for the building, diesel fuel for the vehicles, medical supplies, dues and memberships went up some. You want to comment on that?
Oh,
I can write down the figure.
Dues and memberships.
So part of our national registry certification is only up every 2 years.
Yeah.
So we pay for our employees to maintain their licensure that's required to work. We only have to pay every year. So
Okay.
that goes up and down every other year.
Okay. Anything else you want to comment about your budget, Mark?
I have a question. Los, I have a question. Mark,
Yes.
under your wages, I'm just wondering, does that number that we have here for fiscal year 22, does that reflect the new rate increase that you've just had approved, or is that going to be, does that need to be adjusted?
So again, I'm not exactly sure what it is that you're looking at.
I have the
that-
one, I think it's what you submitted. I've got fiscal year 20, 21, and then your 22 request.
Is there a box sort of like over to the right-hand side that sort of goes through?
Yes.
Okay, so I think the one that you have did not have the COLA included in it, but there was two scenarios. If you look at it, there's two scenarios.
Mhm.
One being if $24 an hour, and then one if it was at current rate.
Gotcha.
What I used for my budget proposal to get to the 39,000, whatever it was the at $24 an hour.
Gotcha.
With
All right.
higher rate. Now, I believe Andrea and I did some calculation after you guys received this. I think what was the COLA, 1.7, I think it was.
Yes.
Something like that. So after calculating that into the non-paramedic hours, okay, it came up to the request is $40,625.82.
Andrea, did you figure in the COLA in there as you did on all the others? I know before we got them.
Right, but I don't, what you don't have is his new sheet with the COLA. What he's giving you, that 40,000, is just the COLAs on the non-paramedics. I work on a separate sheet to do salaries, and Mark and I were trying to reconcile that just before I went away. But he's right, it's gonna add another few $100. That's just the COLAs.
Now, also, I caution you to keep in mind is that if we're talking about now EMS excess revenue offsetting the operational costs and not the ambulance costs, that 40,000 now goes to 55,000. That would be the town share.
Yeah. See, we're trying to stick to the vote that was taken at town meeting as to where it goes.
I appreciate that. I'm also trying to do what I can to make a 24-hour-a-day service to the citizens of Northfield as cost-effective as possible. The amount that I'm asking for is less than the assessment that Irving pays for half of its town.
How about you put in information about the radios, and Skip is going to be talking about radios too. You want to talk to us about the radio?
Yeah. So I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but the amount we're looking for radios is a little over $9,000. we decided that we're going to go with Motorola radios compared to Kenwood. The Kenwoods are a little more expensive. However, the Motorola's radios, I don't know how much information you guys need about the radio system itself, but basically we're moving from the county radio system to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts radio system, which is an 800 megahertz system.
Yeah.
We
understand the need for it, no question about that.
Yeah, I mean, the current radio system is junk at this point. The 800 system, we would have to completely outfit our service with new radios. That's ambulance, the radios in the ambulance, portables in the ambulance, radios in the back of the truck so we can talk to hospitals, as well as, radios for us to communicate to coordinate response. And the base radios that the state wants to give us is one level of radios, but it doesn't really do everything that we needed to do. So we've added some additional money to do some upgrades and get some accessories to these radios. The biggest part of that $9,000 that I'm asking for is to upgrade 2 of the portable radios to what's called multi-band. So it would be one radio that can not only speak on the 800 megahertz system, but also on the 450 radio system, as well as the 153 radio system, which is the Southwest Fire. The reason for that is because we deliver patients to different hospitals, and the hospitals north of us operate on that 153 radio frequency. The hospitals,
and Keene, you mean?
correct, yeah. The hospitals to the south will still be on that 450 megahertz system, even though we moved to 800. They're still going to be, the hospitals are still going to be on 453, and then the portable itself would have to be able to be used on the 800 system. So unfortunately, those radios are very expensive. They're about $8,000 a piece. If we can get them through this for $3,000, it makes the most sense for us to get them now compared to trying to buy them later.
Yeah,
but
that's what I wondered. How much the state is going to furnish to the towns is it by the number of radios or a certain dollar value?
So my understanding is that the Northfield, I can only speak for Northfield EMS, that we have been allocated 5 mobile radios and 15 portable radios. And then they're also going to be supplementing an amount of money per radio for installation and programming. And that's it. They gave us a price list as to, okay, here's your radios, go check out, figure out what it is you want. And then if there's additional adds to that, then obviously you have to pay for the additional, but they have also negotiated with the vendor these additional prices. So it comes through the state bid contract and so on and so forth. So
Okay.
does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. Does anybody else want to ask any questions?
Just a quick question, Lois. How is this going to be, the purchase going to be funded? Is it going to come from town's budget, or is it going to come from the enterprise fund to pay for the radios?
So we haven't discussed that. I turned in my capital request. In prior years, that money has come from excess revenue, but I don't know. Whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah, we haven't thought about that yet. We haven't discussed funding yet. You just mentioned we got it as a capital plan, the radios, the capital request, excuse me. But we don't have I haven't seen a capital plan from you to plan over the years what your capital needs will be. Andrea, I don't know, I think you've given me all the capital plans that you have.
Right, and Mark and I have recently talked about that, and we've talked about setting one up that looks a lot like the police and fire one that you've seen. So we will be working on that 10-year plan that you're used to seeing, putting the equipment down the side and the years in, and then Mark and I are going to work on that for a capital plan, because there are some other things besides just an ambulance every 10 years.
Yes, yeah.
So we are working on that.
Okay.
Lois,
Yes, Jack.
a lot of what we discussed tonight, we discussed in November, and I thought we were going to have a capital plan and a business plan, how that would all be financed. That would answer a lot of the questions. I'm kind of surprised we've received nothing.
Well, Mark did, I mean, I know you're talking a business plan, but Mark and I worked on a staffing plan. He worked on a plan. So that's where we started. We needed to go back. We needed to look at their mission so that we could determine what was the level of staffing. So now that's the first step.
You don't need to look at the mission to look at the capital plan. The capital
No,
plan
that's
is.
not the capital plan.
So I mean, the reality is that if we look at 10 years, the only thing that really is on that capital plan right now is in 2027, the replacement of the 2007 ambulance, and that we anticipate taking 100% from the excess revenue fund to make that purchase. All of the big stuff.
That would tell your case quite a bit, but we've been provided nothing of that.
I'm sorry, you are broken up, Jack. What did you say?
That would sell your case pretty well, but you've not provided that.
How many times?
Now,
How many times do I have to say it? I've said it 14 times. I've said it 12 times in this meeting.
you can say, come up with a plan. Let us document it for us. Something we can see and say, hey, that looks good. Today's the first time I heard of an ambulance not being needed until 2027.
2027, new ambulance.
Hey, that's a joke. That's a disgrace to act like a manager like that.
Jack,
I've
answered these questions. I've answered them. The answer is that in 2027,
Andrea, do you know what I'm talking about?
Excuse me?
Yes.
How do we finance this? It's a joke to you.
Excess revenue fund. That's what I've already told you.
Excess revenue fund. Well, that's what you got to show us.
What part on the finance committee are you not seeing the excess revenue fund amount that's being recertified at the DOR? If you guys aren't seeing that, you're not seeing the whole picture.
Exactly. I'm not seeing that.
We haven't been certified yet. You've got
all right.
That's what DOR.
These are numbers
we
that
got
are
last
available.
year's numbers. You have
I
last
think
year's
you want
numbers.
to support, but you're not giving us the stuff we need.
Jack, I don't have this year's numbers because DOR hasn't supplied them. You have last year's. I gave everybody the free cash certification and the enterprise certification last year. As soon as I get those, when I get cherry sheets, when I get free cash, I have to receive them from the state. I cannot create the excess revenue and free cash certifications. As soon as I receive them, you will be getting them.
The state can't certify them and return them until they get the information from the town in the way of reports. When did those go in? Are those completely in now to the state?
Some of it is in, and some of the balances have just been finished, and we are working on one thing. We have one piece left. It'll all be in. It'll all be in hopefully this week, but we have turned some pieces in. Yes. We are sending everything in. We are cleaning up the balance sheets. It should all be in. And as soon as we get those numbers, you will get them. I can't produce them until the state certifies them.
Okay, but we can't, I don't like to leave it that we're blaming the state when the state
No,
is
I'm not
waiting for
blaming the
information
state.
from us.
No, I understand that. And we are still working on, we have some other things, and I can certainly explain that. I don't want to do that during Mark's time.
Yeah, okay. All right, Jack, are you all, did you want to say more?
I just get us the numbers. I support the extra staffing, but the whole thing is, to me, very vague. I think the agreement with Bernardston, I have a lot of problems with that. I'd almost prefer to just put the extra staffing cost on the town and not subsidize Bernardston. But in any event, I agree with the extra staffing, but it's so vague. And I thought after our discussions in November that we were going to have a plan to show what this is going to involve going forward. Now, we were told in November an ambulance has to be replaced every 10 years. I have no idea. Okay, that means there'd be a cost 350,000 every 5 years.
The state would prefer the ambulances to replace every 10 years, but I believe that we can get 20 out of them based on our call volume.
Okay, I don't know. That's what I've been told.
And that's
Okay,
what,
if you have an efficiency and operating that you can get 15 years out of it, or you only have to replace it every 15 years, fine, but educate us, give us the numbers. And if your excess cash is $70,000 a year and you can save up for a $350,000 ambulance in 5 years, sounds good to me, but I have no idea.
so you have to remember, Jack, is that you're asking me to put together a budget 18 months in advance of the actual expenditures.
We don't know what this.
And the problem is that if I add a capital expenditure line to my budget to say we're just gonna take $10,000 a year, $20,000 a year, and we're gonna put it on the budget and say that's gonna go directly to excess revenue every year. What happens in the middle of the year when I blow an engine in a truck, or we have a major accident or something where I need to utilize that money?
Yeah.
Now it's dedicated to that line item of the budget. I can't utilize it. But if you look again, if you look at the mission statement,
I don't think you should dedicate it to a line item. Show how, in the best laid plans, you're going to be able to save for an ambulance, or most of for an ambulance. I support the extra cost, Mark, but we don't have the numbers. A lot of what we're arguing about tonight is foggy data, and the data is there somewhere. It hasn't been provided.
Can I ask a question, Lois? May I ask a question?
Yes.
So I'm going to ask this as a chair of the Historical Commission. This is my first time presenting. So when you talk about a plan, Jack, specifically, is there a format or an example that you have that would satisfy your need for the plan? Because
No, there's no standard format.
okay, so are you looking for example, like come from the high-tech world, are you looking for like a PowerPoint presentation that basically just kind of walks you through and doesn't?
Not really, no. We want something in writing.
Well, that's what I mean, in writing.
I know what a PowerPoint presentation is, but
Yeah.
no, we're looking for something in writing called a business plan probably, or something to that effect, as
Well,
to
but-
what he plans for the future. What's
Okay.
gone on so far.
Yep.
We hear about it about the time it's happened or after the fact and that sort of thing. We're talking about advanced planning here.
Yes,
The
I get that. So are you, and because this is instructive for me because the Historical Commission will.
Well, we'll talk about your plan when we talk with you about your budget. for
Yeah, I'm
this.
just curious about format and what you want.
There's no format. There's the revenues Mark gets, okay? The budget essentially has been the same the past 2 years,
Right.
all right? Pretty stable. So the budget, carry that going forward with whatever projected cost of living or whatever. You have your X revenue each year going forward. In 2027, you need an ambulance cost in what, 350,000? So
probably.
put that all together and show us how it's going to work. All right. It's all foggy to me, the way it's been presented here tonight. We had these discussions in November. I thought we were going to get some more information.
The problem, Jack, is that I can't tell you. I mean, I'm already struggling to tell you anticipated revenue 18 months in advance. Now you're asking me to do it 24, 36, 72 down the road.
Your revenue's been pretty similar the past few years.
It continues to expand based on call volume. But again, if there's a change in reimbursement, there's multiple factors that go into it. As more and more people convert over to Medicare and Medicaid in the public plans, our reimbursement is 10 times less than what it is normally for a Blue Cross and Blue Shield patient. So,
Well,
if the town expands its population and all of a sudden we have an intake of more motor vehicle accidents, my revenue is going to spike that year compared to, you know, the same Blue Cross Medicare person who goes to the hospital 10 times, you know.
And I agree, Mark. Just you have to make some assumptions. You make reasonable assumptions. You're the professional. Tell us this. Well, I'm assuming Medicare is going to result in a 10% drop in revenue 2 years from now or 3 years from now. Whenever. Just projection's your best guess. But without that, we have no idea if this model is reasonable or not.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to say this without causing too much turmoil, but I don't understand how you cannot understand that at this point. I just, because I think it's been very clear is that, again, 2027, the replacement of the ambulance is going to come from excess revenue.
Right.
All of the other expenditures we've accounted for. We've gotten reimbursed. The cardiac monitors, we're good for 15 years on these cardiac monitors. You know, the next little piece of it is going to be that ambulance in 2027. We're good for everything.
Okay, I will work with him on it specifically. I've just sent Mark a form. It's the one I've been using for fire and police, and we will put his major pieces of equipment on there. We will get pricing on there, and we will have that capital plan ready for you. I'll work with you on it, Mark. I've sent you the form, and we will have that ready for you.
And
then I will.
Excess revenue, that would be great.
Excess revenue is very hard because, but we will, Jack, we will talk about it because excess revenue is very hard to certify. We don't know what excess revenue is going to be every year. That's like trying to guess free. It's like trying to guess free cash. You guys had it at 800,000. You've had it at 200,000.
I understand.
It's very difficult, but we can certainly do an estimated plan, and we can certainly try to look at funding sources to the best of our ability on that plan.
I think it would be super helpful. Thank you.
We will get that to you.
Do I dare even throw out a potential number as to what we're talking about?
Yeah, I'll talk with you, Mark. There's a way to do this with an escalation clause and an estimated percentage as we go forward on the cost of things based on today's costs. I've sent you a form, and we'll do it.
I guess my question is, I don't think this group knows that we're sitting on almost $250,000 in excess revenue.
Yeah, they know from last year. Yes, they do.
We're more aware, Mark, of things. You know, I remember several years ago being told by part of your group that I didn't understand financing. I think I've had quite a few years' experience, not only town financing, but outside. And
me too.
They get your estimated. They get your certified number every year.
Sure. Okay. I think we're all set on the finance committee for questions. Mark, do you have anything else you'd like to ask of us?
Nope, I'm good.
All right.
And Mark and I will talk.
Okay. As you know, that we don't make a decision at this time till we get to the end. We, again, like you're talking about what you have to plan ahead, we're talking about an over $8 million budget that we've got to plan ahead and see whether we can cover it. So thank you. Thanks for coming in. Skip, I know you've been there through all this. You're waiting. We're ready to talk about the fire department budget now.
Yeah, I've been patient.
Good. Thank you. You know the routine, what we go through, and I didn't see many changes in yours. In the budget here. Mm-hmm. Question I have that I didn't know this. Water is going up. Is this the Northfield Water District going up on their prices?
Yeah, that is. If you want to just, if you all have my budget in front of you, obviously the first two line items, which are salary and wages, are arbitrary as far as that was a number that I put in as far as a percentage increase. I know that will be whatever the finance committee and the select board decide.
1.7,
especially the wages for the fire, police, and EMS part-time personnel. Everything else down until the water bill is staying level funded, staying the same. The water bill for the station, I'm increasing because they are increasing their costs for the water. So last year it was 500. I'm requesting 800. And the hydrants, like you said, Lois, the hydrants haven't changed for a long time.
Yeah.
But they are going with an increase probably this year and possibly again next year. That's a number that's given to me by the water commissioners for the Northfield Water Company, and is going from 5460, which it has been for, I think, the last 6 or 7 years, is going up to 6500 this next year.
It's still based on the number of hydrants, isn't it?
It's based on the number of hydrants. I think it's 38 hydrants in their system that services the town buildings and whatnot. So yeah, that's based on the number of hydrants that they have.
Yeah. Okay.
Other than that, all the rest of the line items are basically level funding, right down through.
Yeah.
So that's basically is what it looks like. So it's just the water that's going to be the increase. We increased the hose and equipment account. I believe it was last year. So we're doing good with that as well. So.
Okay. I have a question, and just thinking about it, how valuable are these fire ponds nowadays?
They are still quite valuable because
Okay.
they serve areas that are outside the hydrant district.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we have installed over the last 10 years, we've installed several of them with dry hydrants, what they call dry hydrants or standpipes.
Yeah.
So they're not only useful spring, summer, and fall, but the dry hydrants are installed so that they're well below the frost line. So we actually can utilize them all year long.
Okay. Of course, we have more tanker capacity than we used to have, which helps, I suppose. But
yeah, but the tankers are really only used for your initial attack. You obviously have to supplement that with the mutual aid, and also those tankers have to replenish their water supply as they're shuttling water back and forth.
Yeah.
And fire ponds just give the outlying areas of Northfield better protection.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Before we go into your radios and so forth, emergency management, that's staying the same?
Yeah, emergency management, basically the $3,810 is for the reverse 911 system.
Yeah.
$500 is just for other supplies. The one thing that is in this year is the stipend, what the stipends are. I don't know if that's been listed before, but that figure for the stipends, $3,250 is not coming out of taxation. It's depleting a Vermont Yankee gift fund that we have had. And
we still got some money in it.
Still got money in there for this year and probably the next a few more years to go. So that's not coming out of taxation. That's just depleting a Vermont Yankee gift fund that we had.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Got something out of them still. That's good.
Yes.
Okay. Then you've got radios.
You want to go to the radios or the capital?
In the capital, yeah. And you want to talk whichever first. I don't care.
Okay. Well, why don't we do if you don't mind, why don't we do the capital first?
Okay.
We did have, and I'm not sure what happened along the way, but we did have set aside, or we had done in the capital plan, I believe it was back in 2018, 17 or 18, where we were talking about putting a new chassis underneath the existing rescue truck. And that was in the capital planning, but somehow the line for the GMC rescue truck, it was still there, but the money wasn't dedicated into a certain year for expenditure. That is still at 150,000, which is what I estimated. And it was originally for 2021, which is this year, and I push it off till next year as far as capital planning. Now, I've got a committee that's working right now, and I'm getting more current numbers, which will be for next year, obviously, of rechassing the existing truck, which is now 35 years old, or it might look like we can buy a good used piece of equipment for that amount of money or even less. So we're looking at both options, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay.
something a few years ago that you were rebuilding part of that, or was it on the body or what?
No, that was, no, the body's aluminum body. If we do transfer it over onto a new chassis, because it's 30,
Okay.
it'll be 35 years old. The only other thing we've noticed is the box itself, or the body itself, will probably have to be rewired because the wiring is getting old, it's getting brittle, the coating on it's getting brittle. So
Yeah,
if we do transfer that box over onto a new chassis, then there'll have to be some work done on the body a little bit. It's not rotted away because it's aluminum, it's not rusted or anything, but we will have to rewire it electrically for
I see.
so.
So now you're looking to have that money appropriated this year,
No, next year.
another year.
That's that's in the capital planning. Yes, yeah.
Okay,
For not this year that we're approaching, the following year. I may have put it in the wrong slot then.
I see. Okay.
Originally it was in 2021.
Yeah,
So
all right. Anybody have any questions on that for me? Okay. And that was, let's see, the next thing is nothing else coming up. Scuba, it's sometime.
yeah,
So Skip, are you saying that you wanted in 2023's fiscal budget, not 2022?
that would be yeah, because we're in 2020, 2021 now. We're voting on.
We're in 21 now, and you
Right.
checked,
Oh,
you put on the
voting on
top
2022.
fiscal 22.
Yeah.
That's this coming budget.
No, I'd be looking at doing it the following year, not this year
So
coming
you're
up.
thinking 2023 then?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Just
Okay.
making sure.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. And you had on here scuba bottles, but it's listed under 2020, but
That we expended. That was expended.
it was, so you're
Yeah.
all set
Yeah,
on that.
we purchased the SCBA bottles this past year. So
Yeah.
that money has been expended.
Okay, very good.
And I have projected that we're going to need to replace an engine come about 2028
Okay,
in the 10-year capital plan. So
yeah, oh yeah, I
Okay.
see. All right,
so that's the capital plan. Anybody got any questions on that?
good. Okay, next,
Okay.
now we'll get down to radios, right?
Now we'll get down to radios.
Okay,
Yeah, I finally got some numbers together.
yeah,
We've been playing havoc trying to get exactly where we're going to be. It wasn't until just recently, in fact, it was over the weekend, we were able to test the 800 megahertz system that we're going to be going to, the state police system.
oh,
There's been some concerns on how well that will work because the radio signals don't penetrate the building as well. So I've got a lot of big buildings in town, especially I've got big buildings on the campus. Concern is if you have interior attack crews, if they can communicate what's going on inside to either the pumper outside or the dispatch center for requesting additional personnel, or just the command radio traffic that's needed for the radios. We did some extensive testing over the weekend, and the 800 system, it's kind of a two-tiered system, similar to what we have now, but basically we need to be able to communicate not just from the truck to the dispatch. We also need to be able to communicate from inside the building to outside the building,
yeah,
if you want to call it operations to command. So I'm glad to report that most of the buildings that we did test on, the 800 network seemed to work pretty well as far as penetration.
oh, good.
We have a problem with our 400 system in buildings such as Pioneer Valley Regional School. And when we're inside that building, we can't always communicate outside of the building.
Yeah,
So, and the 800 is no better. It doesn't improve anything, but it's not significantly worse. So that makes me feel better as far as going to the 800 network.
I see.
It does, however, if we have operations going on and need to get back to shelter control, our dispatch center, for either requesting mutual aid or talking to incoming mutual aid, the portables will not cover that. So it looks like we will have to add some vehicle repeaters to get the signal back to dispatch. And it looks like we're going to have to, we would probably do 3 repeaters for a specific apparatus. The first engine out the door needs to have a repeater to get this signal back to shelter control.
Yeah.
If that vehicle is tied up, the second engine out, to whether it be another call or whatever, needs to have a repeater to have that same capability. And then if we're not talking structure fires, but we're talking brush fires where we're in remote areas of the town, we would need a repeater for the brush truck. So in addition to going with the radio system, we will need repeaters in those 3 vehicles. So
Okay.
the breakdown, basically, when I was initially asked, I think it was like 18 months or 2 years ago,
Yeah.
what we would need for radios for Northfield, it was a bare bones estimate as far as what we thought we would need for 800, knowing that along the way, our needs may vary. So the bottom line is it looks like we need, from what was originally talked about and where we are at now, I would need 3 additional mobile radios. Of those mobile radios, 5 need to have a configuration where the head is mounted remotely from the radio. It's called a remote head, and that's in the engines where you just have the control head on the top and you have the radio mounted elsewhere. We need to have an additional speaker and microphone out at the pump panel or on the ladder truck where the ladder is being operated, so that the operator of that has communications. We have to have a new base. We have to have a mobile radio that also, as it would be used as a base station for the fire station. And so there's some of these extras are not included in the original equipment that the state, we're getting through the state.
Okay.
So those additional radios, setups, the mic and pump panel speaker, the base station, and 12-volt chargers for the portables, basically the whole thing, and the 3 repeaters, which are fairly expensive. We're going to have a shortfall of about $32,000. Now, when I broke the numbers down, the radios that the state is committing to us is a little over $73,000 worth of equipment. But we need to augment that with $32,000 to give us all the capabilities that we currently have on the 400 meg system.
Okay.
That would be an article on this year's town meeting.
Yes. Andrea, are you taking that down, or?
I have nothing in writing other than what he has said. So if he could submit that, then I could give it to you as supplemental. But he sent in the truck, but I have seen nothing for fire department with radios. So now that you know, if you could forward that, Skip, that information, then I could get it out to the finance committee and certainly put it in our budget material.
Do you want that in the capital planning form, or do you want it?
Yeah, that would be fine. Or attach whatever sheets that are helpful. You know, that's what Mark did. He just attached sheets circling the ones or whatever. Yeah, however you can fill it out with, just like you described it. I think then I can I'll send it out to them. That way, if the discussion comes up on town meeting floor, everybody's got the pages and they understand the request.
All right.
That would be great.
Okay, that, because that was my question. How, you've answered it. How much is the state going to furnish and that we don't have to provide? And so there's looks like about 2/3 of it then that they will come up with.
Correct.
But I think that was a great idea, testing it inside the buildings and so forth.
Well, we really weren't going to know what we were going to need when it came to that. And, when we first made the requests for the radios, they were basically speaking of just the truck radios and a portable for each truck. And the way we operate, we needed more radios than what they are, than what they were going to give. So until I knew what we were going to need, which was this weekend, unfortunately, then at that point I put some numbers together off from the state bid grant.
Okay.
And one thing about that is any additional this state radio bid, the pricing on that, whether you go with Motorola or Kenwood, is locked in for 3 years.
Oh, good.
So
that's a help.
it is very good. And both vendors have locked themselves in for a 3-year period. So there won't be any escalating costs on the radio.
Good. Now, let's see, do we have to go through the COG for the ones that the state is providing, or how?
There's going to be an order form that's going to be coming out. And so we'll have to do an order form, and that some of this money needs to be expended before July 1st. It's a 3-year state grant to expand the 800 system out to Franklin County communities. Some of that money has to be expended. So there will be an order form coming out for at least the radios that the state is going to supply.
Yeah, I see.
Then after that, and obviously it'd be after July 1st, I could see where we would have to do an order, okay, for the additional radios and accessories that we deemed we needed. The system is online right now. I mean, it's operational right now, but they're not looking to kick everybody over to it, at least for another 6 to 8 months, when they're going to start transitioning departments over to it.
Oh.
There is a radio patch now between the 800 and the 400, so we can still operate on the 400, and we can transition over to the 800 as the radios become available, and we can get them installed.
Oh, okay.
The only kicker to this is we know the 400 radio system is slowly dying. That's why there's a big push to go to the 800. They still haven't come up with a good solution for paging. Obviously, when they page out, it's to alert all the firefighters or even the on-call EMS personnel or whatnot. If the 400 network does completely die, then there'll have to be some other type of alerting our volunteer and on-call people. So we're looking at a couple of other different options as far as that's concerned. So
okay.
But
now, somebody, I don't think it was on yours. No, somebody had in an item to for COG maintenance, continuing maintenance. Is that going to be an annual charge?
Well, they still have to maintain the 400 network, even if it isn't for day-to-day communications, for paging for right now. So they still have to maintain
for a little while longer then.
For probably a few years. So
okay.
As the system continues to die, then they're going to have to either going to have to come up with a paging solution, or each individual town may have to go to. There are apps that you can get now. One is called I Am Responding. Another one is Spotted Dog, where actually the page goes out over everybody's smartphone, that type of thing. But there's a cost involved with that. For Northfield to get on the I Am Responding port system, and it's based on the number of calls you do a year, it'd be about $1,000 for us to do that. And it's only as good as what your cell phone coverage is. That's the other problem.
Yeah.
Paging now works pretty much everywhere, and cell phone coverage isn't 100% in Northfield yet. So
it isn't. Okay.
So there's some gaps in that. So it's fine as a backup at this point, but it's not sufficient for primary paging.
Okay. All right. Other members have any questions or anything to comment about with this?
Any questions for your friendly fire chief?
Yeah. Jack, anything?
No, sounded good to me.
Okay. Sue? She's okay. All right. Let's see. Bernie?
I'm fine with the chief. Thank you.
Okay. All right. You have anything else you'd like to ask us?
No, I'll submit that. I'll submit that request for the additional radios on the network, and I'll give you, a list of what they are and whatnot, so you have that information.
Okay.
Other-
Andrea is still, you won't be back in the office till next week?
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, but he can email that to me whenever
Sure.
whenever he gets it together. That's fine.
I'll put it together. I'll put it together probably tomorrow, and I'll email it to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
You'll be good.
Okay. All right, Skip. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry it took so long, but I
That's okay.
didn't allow enough time, I guess.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so next we will talk with Dee about the plans that she submitted as chairman of the Historical Commission. And one thing is the amount. First of all, we'll talk about the money. You're increasing purchases by $300. Can you tell me what that's based on?
Yes. And I'm assuming, can I assume that everybody has the notes that I put into
Except they're not complete. Yes, I sent them out to everybody, but
Okay.
it's in that box. But at the bottom, it doesn't seem to finish. It talks about Center Cemetery, comma, 2, TO, and then that's where it ends.
Oh.
So
Okay.
maybe something got dropped off, maybe.
It's probably the cell isn't big enough. I'm looking at my PDF. Why don't I just start at which one do you want me to go over first? The 300?
Yeah,
Okay.
300 in the regular
Okay, so
budget.
the 300 is new. And what I put down was reproduction of Northfield history books for the Historical Commission. So approximately 10 books.
Okay, and you say 10 books, and then you talk about $100 a book, and yet you talk about $300.
Yes. So, and let me just read the note just in case it got cut off. So what it says is 10 books times $30 is 300. So that's the request. And what I said is rather than buy original books for research, training, and education, so the original books would be $70 to $100 a piece. So what we're asking for instead of original books is to print what's available via online publishing. So for example, Temple and Sheldon, which I think was published in the 30s and is approximately 600-700 pages, is available through the library, but it's not a rare book, but it's not a common book, and it has very thin pages in an old format. So
I'm very familiar with it. I have it.
Yeah. So, and it's a beautiful book. I've borrowed it and looked at it, but what I want to be able to do as somebody who needs to be up to speed on certain aspects of history, as do other commission members, especially those that are new, including myself, is we want to get a printout where we can highlight and make notes and attach stickies and actually discuss those with other members. So when we're researching, for example, the Shell Bridge crossing area, some of those crossings across along the Connecticut River,
The ferry boat system.
yeah, are documented in Temple and Sheldon. So it would be nice to be able to, rather than going to the original book, and there's only so many of those original copies available. And the online searching that I did indicated they could be anywhere from $75 to $100 a piece.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
It's only that Temple and Sheldon that you're talking about?
for the most part, there's some others. That's why I included the figure.
Okay, that's the most valuable one and most accurate.
Correct. And that's kind of our central, to get everyone onto the same page, so to speak, on the commission, especially when you bring on new people. That's where we want to start, is with Temple and Sheldon. So I'm anticipating in future years that we would come back and say, yes, and now we'd like to get copies of XYZ book, or the Indian deeds, or the John Pynchon letters from Deerfield that talk about Northfield, things like that. But this is really to get people up to speed on, mostly on Temple and Sheldon.
But you have turnover on your committee. You have had, you yourself are fairly new on the committee, right?
Right.
What happens then?
Well, these are, I mean, they can be turned back in and we can keep them in the historical commission, or we can allow the person to keep it, whichever you prefer. I mean, these are actually, it's like going to Staples, but we're not going to Staples. It's like a photocopy thing put together.
It's not something that ever been done as far as any committee getting any reference material given to them. If people are interested in something like that, you can't mark it up, but you can go to the, I'm sure there's, Temple and Sheldon is in the library, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I've checked it out. I can't mark it up, and I
No,
can't,
of course not.
right?
You've been able to take it out, though? They do allow you to check it out?
Yes, but I mean, I can't keep it indefinitely, which is what I'd like to be able to do. I mean, it's not an, as you know, since you're familiar with it, Lois, it's not something where you just kind of go through and skim. I mean, you can,
No.
but it's 700 pages worth of great and detailed information covering, you know, from the 1670s forward.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions? We don't make decisions tonight on whether we'd support it or not anyway, but we want to get the information. That's our standard procedure.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions or comments? No? Okay.
Do you want me to speak to the rest of it?
Yes, please.
Okay. And this is my first time as chair of the Historical Commission. Most of you are familiar with Carol Lebo, who was with us for many years. Anyway, so let me just find I'm trying to look at Zoom and the spreadsheet at the same time. Okay, so the second thing was we are funding a historical/cultural speaker at $500 per speaker. This was originally planned as an in-person event, but due to COVID, the festival adapted and moved online. So we're actually able to have more people hear the speaker. You know, one of the benefits of COVID is the fact that having somebody online, there were no travel expenses, and we were able to accommodate more people listening to the speaker. The speakers that we've invited are folks, last year's speaker, which was the most well-attended of the entire festival, was somebody who spoke about a freed African-American from Deerfield who made her way with her family through Northfield and into southern Vermont. So we talked about that history, and that was a woman from UMass Amherst who did that and has written several books. So it actually tied in quite nicely with Northfield history. And we were able to talk a little bit about the Prince family as well as Calvin. I'm going to draw a blank.
Calvin Swan?
Yes, thank you. So that's the speaker. Do you have any questions about that before I move on to the next one?
Well, you call it festival. I wasn't aware that there was a festival going on.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you started or what?
No, that's actually, we sponsored a speaker for the festival. The festival is larger than our speaker. And I can send you the information on that. It's actually coming up. This year's is coming up in, I spoke about last year's, which was in June. this year's, they changed it to February to take advantage of people being indoors during the winter, because the original was to create an event in Northfield and to bring people to Northfield for the festival, but it had to go online because of COVID. So
are you working on this one with the Historical Society, or are they not involved? Usually there's been one annual event of the Historical Commission and Historical Society combining.
This is through Nataba and Kiwanis.
Okay.
Yep. And it's somebody, and we always have overlap among all the groups. In my experience, a lot of the folks that have been on the Historical Commission or on the Historical Society, also on the Shellbridge Advisory Committee. So there's a lot of overlap of sharing of ideas.
Okay, then maintenance of the historical markers.
Yes, and not having the full history, my understanding of the maintenance of markers is that the Historical Commission, I asked Tom Walker about this, the Historical Commission, as I gather, in the past has actually contracted with somebody to do the landscaping around those stone markers.
Did he say that the highway department did any of it at any time?
No,
Okay.
that the Historical Commission had done. I thought it was kind of odd myself looking at it. I thought, why isn't this why don't we work with the highway department and put it in there, because they have the expertise. So I'm open to suggestions on this one, or if people from the Finance Committee have more insight into the history of this particular expense.
It started out several years ago with a man that died, and his wife wanted donations go to maintaining the historical markers in town.
Okay.
She had been a school teacher, and she did a section on, she believed that the fifth graders should learn about Northfield history. So that was why that fund was set up. And they run for a few years, and of course, it dwindled. And then when that got left, then it was gone. I mean, excuse me.
Oh, okay.
Then they came and asked for the money from the town to maintain the markers.
Gotcha. Okay. Would it make sense to, in your opinion, would it make sense to talk further with Tom about having the highway department work with us on this rather than us contracting out?
Why don't you wait until we can talk about it a little
Okay.
bit?
I'll just put it out.
I don't know what kind of maintenance you guys are talking. Like, are you talking mowing and things? Because they don't have a lot of that equipment. I mean, they don't really mow. I mean, we have a mower for the town hall, but we'd have to talk about what kind of actual equipment they have to do the kind of maintenance you're talking
I'm
about.
not talking about them doing the maintenance so much as, for example, they're responsible for the maintenance of the cemeteries, and some of these markers, it could be added to whichever professional they're contracting, like if it's...
Well, they used to be local people years ago
Yeah,
that
I'm not
did the
sure.
mowing in the cemeteries, but now I think it's Snow that has the contract, isn't it,
Right.
Andrea?
I believe so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, so that I don't know. I don't know who's contracted to do the memorial monument maintenance. Do you happen to remember, Andrea?
I have no idea. Is the town actually paying for them? I have not seen a bill for that, unless it was going directly to the Historical Commission in the past.
I
It
doubt
hasn't gone through me.
No, because we've had an appropriation for it. So I don't think maybe they haven't done it every year either. I don't know. So you know which monuments, what the monuments are, don't you?
Well, I'm assuming it's the Nathaniel Dickinson and the stone ones, not the highway markers are signs, that are metal signs.
Those are by the state, yeah.
Those are by the state. These, I'm assuming, are the stone the stone markers.
Yeah. Okay, how about Captain Richard Beer's burial spot? I
Right.
don't know that that's been considered in the past, but I think it should be. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of that, and my understanding is that's on private property.
Yes, it is. And before Carol left, I notified her and asked her to make sure that the owners of that property, when it changed hands, became aware of the significance, because it's up there on South Mountain Road, and has been in some shrubbery along the edge of the road. And I didn't want it just thrown out as something that somebody thought had been dropped there or something like that. So I think that the outfit that bought that, it used to be Linden Hill School, and then
the Redemption Christian Academy.
Yeah.
And Carol reached out when it changed hands with some sort of real estate.
Yeah, from California.
From California.
When I contacted her,
I'm not sure what the response was from them, but I do know that she reached out because that was discussed at one of our meetings.
Yeah. Well, that's what, I think we need to be sure that we don't lose track of something like that along this process. As far as I'm concerned, it could be continued one of the monuments, but it's a job that needs to be done. The monuments need to be saved and preserved, trimmed around, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody else have any
I
comments?
just have a question concerning the cemeteries. Is like South Mountain or what's that, Collars Cemetery, or some of these that I'm not sure, at least personally, who is actually responsible or who has ownership of these cemeteries. I know that several cemeteries are responsibility of the town, but I don't know if all the cemeteries that exist in our town are the responsibility of the town.
Yes, and they're listed on the town website, which ones. And there's several.
Are you sure about the South Mountain Cemetery and the Collar Cemetery, that they're on town property?
Yes, the South Mountain one, because there was a fallen tree in there, and that was handled by the highway department.
But does that prove what I'm asking you?
I don't think they would be moving or doing stuff on property that
wasn't that the one where a lot of public comment about the fact that it needed taken care of? I don't know. I think the way that you find out some of these things and verify them is for cemetery land. I would think it would be in the assessor's records. Who owns it?
Well, what I did as a historical commission, I can certainly talk with the assessors. What I did as a historical commission person was to look into the Massachusetts State History Registry. So those are all listed as Northfield historical, designated Northfield historical properties.
That's a good source, but does it say who owns the land that the cemetery is on? I don't know.
No, that's the assumption. I can certainly follow up with the assessors. I'm just telling you what I do know at this point.
Yeah.
Which would, if I add the assessors in there, then you have 3 points of information, which is what's on the town website as the cemeteries, what's in the Massachusetts inventory, and that are designated as historical properties in Northfield. And then I can add the assessors to that. So I appreciate the suggestion to follow up with the assessors.
Yeah, there's 7 listed on the town's website.
Are there?
Center, Collar, Mount Herman Cemetery, Gill Center Road, Northfield Farm Cemetery, Millers Falls Road, Pentecost Cemetery, Pentecost Road, South Mountain Cemetery, South Mountain Road, West Northfield Cemetery, Mount Herman Station Road. And then the center one was on Parker Ave and Collar was on Collar Cemetery Road. So there's 7 listed on the website.
Okay, so the 2 that would be, in my mind, a question are listed as town cemeteries then, Andrea, right?
Center Cemetery, Collar Cemetery, Mount Herman Cemetery, North Farm Cemetery, Northfield Farms, Pentecost, and they're all listed here with Tom as a contact.
So Collar and South Mountain are the 2 that I was wondering
They're both
about.
listed, yes, yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
What
And their
we-
Tom's, phone number and contact information are listed for them here.
Okay, all right. So the contract with Snows would be all but those two, I think, I would imagine. You know,
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what his contract is. And I do know that he's actually got a contract to do some work on the who's buried where and registering who's where, and he's been working on that as well.
yeah, so. Okay, so what were you thinking of about the cemeteries? For a bun-
I just left the budget as is because I did get the, which is the 500 for the maintenance of the markers and monuments. I just wanted to make the finance committee aware that no maintenance has been done on the stones themselves.
And,
And that if you've been through Center, or speaking of those two, South Mountain or Center, there's quite a bit of damage and decay that occurs with old stones, and they need to be handled in a particular way, and it's not inexpensive. So on the South Mountain, we had some residents of South Mountain step up and do some communication. I'm not asking for this in the budget. I'm just making the finance committee aware that this is an area where it's been on the project list, concern list for the historical commission for quite a while. So the citizen group was going to apply for a CPA grant, and we were going to support them in that effort.
well, the thing, that's all well and good. The thing is, with the cemeteries, the stones deteriorate over the years, especially those oldest ones and so forth, or they get damaged or whatever.
Right.
But the town cannot take on the repair to cemetery stones. I mean, there's no end of it. The Center Cemetery is the oldest cemetery, as far as I know.
Yep.
And there are stones there in terrible shape, no question about it. And even, well, Pentecost is the newest cemetery. But
Well, what these residents did was they actually reached out to a consultant to get like a plan and a cost estimate to do the work. So for South Mountain. So then they put together a proposal, I believe, that they presented, because it is fundable through the CPA funds.
okay,
As some of this maintenance of the historic markers might be as well.
yes.
I'm not sure, but I think you could probably, if it turns out and B is right, and they need more than this, sort of routine $500 maintenance, that might also be an application to the CPA. I believe those are fundable through CPA funding, which the town is already setting aside.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thought then. I think they're receiving applications now, aren't they?
Yes, and we have we have a member, I should say, of the historical commission who sits on the CPC.
Finance committee does too.
Yeah. And so I'm not asking anything from the finance committee about the cemeteries. I'm just making them aware because, for example, in the future, to your earlier points about planning, and I don't think we've done a lot of, as a historical commission, I don't think we've done a lot of coming to the finance committee and saying, hey, we're looking out like 5 years, here's what we see. Right now, so I'm just telling you as a courtesy and as out of respect for your background and my newness in the position, is that it's possible at some point that we would move forward or need to move forward with a warrant article, for example, if we got funding but we needed matching from the town. And I'm assuming that we would discuss that with you, given my
Do a capital request.
Yeah. Yeah. If that's not happening this year, this is a long-term project, but it is a long-term concern. And there are, just talking about Calvin Swan, for example, his homestead is up in our open space, and his beautiful obelisk is down in the Center Cemetery, and that hasn't been touched in I don't know how long, but quite a while.
But there was money appropriated last year before on the cellar hole and preserving that.
Yep, and we worked with the Open Space Committee And I'm sure there were like a couple other committees as well. So that's the nice thing about Northfield is, yeah, we all went up there and trooped around up on members of several committees to take a look at what the proposed work was.
My concern is that if you're working together, that's fine. I don't want somebody going out and saying, oh, we need to hire somebody to do this work, and somebody, some other department is already doing something like that. Andrea would probably be aware of it if they were. So that's it. All right, anybody have any questions they want to ask of me about this budget request? None. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
I think
you.
that's it then, B. Okay.
Okay. And then just for my edification, what's the next step? I just present, and then at a later point, as you go through all of the departments, then you kind of circle back.
Yeah, what we do is get all the requests, and then we get, like she's talking about, free cash and other things. We find out how much money we have available, and then we start and make our decisions on what we will recommend to the voters. And if we're not recommending a request that somebody has put in, we will notify them.
Okay.
If you don't hear anything, if we don't notify anybody, that means we're going to make the recommendation, but we will notify of any requests that are made to us that we're not going to recommend.
So no news is good news?
Yeah, yes. But it'd be much nearer to town meeting time before.
Gotcha. And I think, as I mentioned, I am trying to sit in on as many finance committee meetings as I can, just to become more familiar with this important part of the town process.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Back to the finance committee. We had skipped over the minutes from our last meeting, which was January 25th. And I had sent those out. Does anybody want to make a motion about them?
I, Bernie Parada, make a motion to accept the minutes as written for the January 25th, 2021 Finance Committee meeting.
Second.
Seconds.
Motion made and seconded to accept the minutes of the January 25th meeting. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
All right. 5 of us here. Tony Mateo is absent, so thank you. We've gone through EMS and Fire and Historical Commission, and Andrea's reported on nothing yet on free cash. Oh, as far as Andrea sent me, and I hadn't looked it up though, Andrea, but the governor has prepared his budget, and it's not as bad as no slashing really, but on the other hand, that's not the final word. We'll wait and see what the House
the
does.
governor's, we tend to take the governor with a grain of salt, although he is proposing an increase in general government aid, but we have to wait and see what the House and Senate really does.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And let's see, there was something today that I sent out. It's an invitation to a meeting about open space. Do you remember more about it, Andrea? Or that was basically it. I sent it out to everybody today anyway. They're having an open session.
Right, they're doing their open space plan.
I'm sorry?
It's the open space plan, like public meeting.
Yes, yes. And our committee was one of those listed that they wanted to have, be sure and be invited. It's coming up in another week, I think it is. So you had that. And let's see what else. Anybody attend any other meetings?
No.
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 Okay, I did, well, not attending, again, Zoom meetings. One budget subcommittee meeting from Pioneer last week, and they're still just going through the budget. And I think there's a meeting, another meeting this week. And then they'll get to us. This subcommittee makes their recommendation to the full school committee, and then they have a public hearing on it. And what I heard, Andrea, and then it turned out that it was because of the date of our annual meeting, they were talking about, somebody questioned from one of the towns, questioned the percentage increase. And the answer was, well, the percentage increase is higher over what your assessment was last year, but it wasn't that much of an increase over what you would have originally had as an assessment. They said they adjusted it. So I did check that out and got the information. It was, the adjustment was made in June. And I think what happened, I looked and we used that figure. So I think what happened was, because we were having our town meeting later, we captured that new figure instead. So that's what they've got. But so anyway, we'll see. We don't have any assessment yet till we go through this process. Let's see. I did, after that, I saw a school committee meeting where they're talking about that. Anyway, I emailed the chair of the school committee and I have not had a response, but I want the status of the regional agreement. You know, Tony was our representative on the Heart Committee, and I think it was last meeting we brought it up. And the Heart Committee had several changes to the regional agreement that they had submitted. And this subcommittee, the last I ever heard, they were reviewing it. I believe it still has to go to the state, but I mentioned in the email to her that I'd like to see it. It's going to have to be voted on town meeting votes. So why not get it on this spring at town meetings? But I haven't heard back. So they've got other things they're working on, I guess, right now. So our next meeting will be next Monday night. So far, I've got the tech school lined up to do a Zoom presentation, and I will get others. I'll get working on that tomorrow to get others lined up. Anybody else have anything they'd like to bring up? Andrea, you've got a captive audience.
Yeah, not at this time. I'm a little bit removed from my office, so I have some paperwork I brought with me, but I am working on some additional stuff. I've already emailed Mark and confirmed with him that he's got my email, so we'll be working on his capital budget. He has a couple of things that can go on that schedule.
Who's capital?
So I'll be working on it for the EMS.
Oh, okay, yes, okay. Where do we stand on the
I'm still gonna get
sewer budget?
I met with Isaac on the school sewer budget, went over a few things with him that they had questions. There doesn't look like there's going to be any real dramatic changes there. So now that we've met and talked about some of the questions that they had, he's going back to the sewer commissioners and they'll discuss it again. But they wanted him to meet with me and go through various things. So we have met, we have talked about the sewer budget. Again, I don't have any it doesn't look like there's going to be any real dramatic changes. I didn't send it to you because even though we went over it, he doesn't have it approved by the commissioners. So I didn't want to send it to you and then it comes back with changes. Yeah. So as soon as I get the word from him that they're okay with what we talked about or any minor changes, then I will get that out to you. But again, it doesn't look like there's going to be anything hugely dramatic there.
Well, with the state requests and so forth, or demands, whatever, is no extra cost involved in some of that work? I thought there were things that didn't pass.
That's mostly going to be capital stuff.
Oh,
so
I
that's
see.
completely
Okay.
different than the operating side. Right. And we're talking about going after funding for that. We have to look at various funding sources, including the SRF fund.
Okay. Okay, you've frozen right where you are.
They promised us information in December, mid-December. They haven't shown up with their report yet. So until they come back with what they want, we're still waiting.
Well, then I won't try to get them in for next Monday night.
For any capital.
Till you're back. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Anybody Otherwise, I'll
To say-
entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried, and we are adjourning this meeting of February 1st. Thank you, everybody.